Good afternoon. Today I want to take a retrospective approach and think about if I could go back in time and have a chat with my younger self and sit down with him. He'd probably be a lot more stubborn. He'd have less gray hair on the side and his hair wouldn't be receding. But if I could go back in time and sit down with myself and really give him some advice on what I know now, but to have him use it right from the start, because I would do a lot of things differently, especially on the real estate side, not the other stuff. I certainly made a lot of mistakes there. But if I could go back in time and give myself some solid real estate advice from the future, this is what it would be. And if you have any questions about real estate investing, I've been doing these live videos every day now. And if you are curious or if you want to invest in one of these real estate opportunities, just go over to callseth.com and we can have a 20 or 30-minute chat. So the first thing I would tell myself is figure out your end game. Or if you're a Simon Sinek fan, he does his figure out your why videos. You can call it a couple different things. But you really have to figure out what you want to accomplish. And when I'm sitting down with a potential investor, I don't really talk about real estate. All I do is I ask them about their plans for their life. Do they want to travel? In 10 years, do they want to start giving back? Do they want to build schools in third world countries? What sort of things do they want to accomplish? Because you can't figure out the strategy and the types of assets you'll be using unless you know the end result you're trying to achieve. And this was a mistake I think I made. I didn't have a clear why or a clear vision for what I wanted to accomplish with real estate. My younger self, I knew I wanted to be successful. I knew I wanted to invest in real estate. I had started off in the real estate business, selling the residential product that got my broker's license. 2 years in, I got my broker's license and was successful there. And then I started acquiring these single family properties. But if I could go back in time, I'd say, younger Seth, think about where you want to go and is the asset you're investing in the best vehicle to accomplish that. And for me, when my son was born, that was a big life-changing moment. I'm sure the fathers out there can appreciate this, but when you're holding your son or daughter in your arms for the first time, a lot of changes happen in the blink of an eye. For me, I had an intense need to do more and be a better person. Not for myself anymore, but for my son. And this goes into the legacy aspect of real estate and how I want to build a legacy for him. And that way he can learn all the lessons that I've learned and in this amazing world of real estate, because it makes you really go inside yourself and become a better person to be successful on the real estate investing side. So I would tell myself to think about the end game more. And take a hard look. It doesn't happen overnight, and sometimes things change. You can go from being a single bachelor to being a father, and obviously your life gets turned upside down, and what was your goal is no longer your goal. But figure out the end game. That would be my number one tip for younger Seth. Number two would be scale. And this goes hand in hand with figuring out the end game you're going for. So for myself, I knew I wanted to go big, and I had this vision with what I wanted to accomplish. So it would take 1,000 houses to hit my target. 1,000 houses. Can you imagine dealing with 1,000 roofs or roofs, depending on which side of the country you're on? Can you imagine dealing with 1,000 different property tax bills? That is just insane. But when I first started investing, and many people do, I was familiar with the residential product because that's what I was selling. So that's what I got into. But was that necessarily the best type of asset to invest in if my end game was a lot bigger than that? Probably not, because dealing with 1,000 houses, I don't think I would sleep. I would have nightmares dealing with 1,000 houses. Though I have interviewed a lot of people in my podcast who are quite successful in running these big single-family home operations, but I don't think I could do that. That's nuts. The other good thing about scale is you have expenses. And, well, you have expenses, obviously, but how you deal with the expenses is different. You have an economy of scale. So with property management for your single-family home, you're going to pay 10 or 12% to that management company to manage the property for you. Well, with these larger multifamily properties, you have, let's say, 200 units. Well, your management expense is going to be, let's say, 2, 3, or 4% versus the 10 or 12, just because you have more units in one place. 1,000 houses, you can't have one maintenance man or one maintenance crew to look after your 1,000 houses, because 1,000 properties, you would be in many different cities or towns, most likely. But with, let's say, 300 units, you've got one team on site, and instead of 1,000 roofs, you're dealing with maybe 6, depending on how the property is laid out, whether it's garden style, mid-rise, high-rise, etc. So the expenses are a lot easier to manage, and you do get economy of scale. The other thing to bring to mind is you have one house, one tenant. And this is what I painfully experienced in my single-family home investing. I had a partner at the time who basically went rogue and drove the portfolio into the ground. And we had a couple properties, they were rented, tenant moves out, the lease is at an end, and they refused to bring a new tenant in the property. And one house, one tenant, while that one tenant's gone, your income, your revenue, whatever it was, it now drops to 0. And things are not so good when you have all these expenses and you have you have the mortgage payment, you have all the expenses, and you have no revenue coming in. Even with the triplex, one tenant moves out, that's 1/3 of your revenue gone. That's a huge impact. But if you have, let's say, 300 units and 10 units are vacant, well, that is the cost of doing business, and that's to be expected. So, the scale factor really helps you out, especially in tough economic times. Having that scale is really, it has a buoyancy effect. Lots of the really successful investors I interview on my podcast, Purchase to Profits, they talk about how scale has kept them above water during the tough times. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So other than scale, we have valuation. I'll add an I there. So if you've been watching the videos I've been doing, the way single-family homes and multifamily commercial properties are valued are totally different. So I'll draw my single-family home here. This is a pretty bad house, but we'll go with it. So these are valued on the comparable approach. So you're looking at comps. And like I've explained before, the appraiser, a valuer, the lender, the bank is going to be looking for similar properties in the neighborhood that I've sold. So if three 3-bedroom, 2-bath homes sell at 400, but you paid 450, well, guess what? Your house is now worth 400. But with commercial properties, multifamily, we use the income approach, and the income approach rewards free cash flow. It rewards income. So that means an investor is willing to pay an X multiple to get that source of income, and that's called an NOI. So I'll say, income approach. And that's all based on the NOI. So what the NOI is, it's net operating income. So you take your gross rent and you minus your expenses, subtract your expenses, and that gives you your NOI. We don't include debt service. I'll do a full video on NOI and how it's actually calculated. But for now, we have a lot more control. We can be way more creative, bring in good management, coming up with other income streams, whether it's valet trash, whether it's private parking, private yards, all sorts of different things we can do in these large properties. And also the scale helps us too. If we have a $25 rent increase over one tenant, that's $25. But you have that over 200, 300, 400 units, you're starting to have a really big impact, especially using the income approach, because income is rewarded here. Even if I push my rents and I have the highest renting property on the street, well, if the other 3 houses similar to mine have sold at that price, do I get rewarded for that increased revenue? No, because the lender and the appraisers care about the property, not about the income. So the way these commercial properties are valued, if I could go back in time, I would really tell myself to get into the commercial side, where you can make a really big impact on the value of the property. And last but not least is debt. Anybody who's applied for a residential mortgage knows the bank will want an arm, two legs, your firstborn child, and probably rights to your grandchildren. Well, that's just the nature of residential mortgages. They go on TDS, total debt service, gross debt service, GDS, and they're really looking at you to sign and guarantee that loan. So if you stop paying the loan, well, the bank will come after you for their money. But with commercial properties, there's something called non-recourse. And that means that the bank really cares about the asset. They don't care about you so much. So if you stop paying, they'll gladly take that cash flow producing asset and not come after you. So this is a huge deal. Do not underestimate the power of non-recourse. If things go bad, you can actually extricate yourself from that situation without losing everything. With residential mortgages, if you're signing for it, the bank will come after you, and hard. So non-recourse, really important. The other thing would be interest only. Now, I've interviewed some foreign investors on my show, Purchase to Profits, and in Australia, they had interest-only mortgages. That's changing now with some changes that that the government's implementing. But interest-only with the commercial property, so let's say it's a 10-year loan. Well, maybe 5 years of that 10-year loan, you're only paying the interest only. You're not paying down the principal. And most real estate investors don't care about principal pay down because that's not really where you make your money. So what this does is it frees up cash flow. If you're on your own, you'll get more cash flow. If you have investors participating in the deal, well, they'll get to share on those increased cash flow profits. The other advantage, other than non-recourse and interest only, is the fact that banks actually want to lend a lot more money. So let's say you approach the bank and you want to mortgage a property for $300,000. And then the same day, another person comes into the bank wanting a loan for $30,000. Guess which loan is actually going to get a lot better terms and a lot better service? Well, the fact is the bank wants to move large sums of money. They have their residential retail type of lending, then they have their commercial lending. And not only non-recourse, interest only, the two systems are set up a lot differently. And the fact is the bank would rather, if the bank could, they would move $1 billion at a time. And that's why you see these huge business deals going on, and there's a lot of money that changes hands. So if I could go back in time and sit down with my younger self, I would talk about debt and how non-recourse interest-only payments and the fact that the bank actually wants to lend larger sums of money. That would steer me towards multifamily real estate and away from doing the single-family homes. So if you have any questions about any of this, or if you think real estate investing sounds pretty good and you want to get involved in some of these multifamily real estate deals, head on over to callseth.com and we can have a quick chat, talk about your why and what you want to accomplish, and really just go through any questions you have, and I can go into a lot more detail about any aspect of multifamily real estate that you'd like to talk about. So I hope this really helped. I really wish I could hop in a time machine and go back, because I would be a lot farther ahead knowing what I know now, but that is life. You make mistakes and you learn from them, and that's important why for passive real estate investors, you need to work with somebody who understands the real estate market and who has made those mistakes, and who is an experienced person myself. I have 11 years now, almost 12 years in real estate. I've seen some things in my career. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. I will be coming back to you tomorrow, Saturday, with a new video. Have a good one. Bye.